The next morning, I had already forgotten the serious diagnosis I'd received the day before. My memory was playing tricks on me. Nevertheless, I was still perfectly aware that I was suffering from a postpartum mood disorder. When Gerhard, my mother, and Elliot arrived in my room, I noticed straight away that Gerhard had brought some suitcases with him. He told me that he had decided to stay with me every night while I was in hospital. He had brought a camp bed and the bedding necessary to get it set up in my room, which was, thankfully, big enough to accommodate a second bed. I was pleased and reassured to know that he would be with me almost all of the time. It was the unexpected visit from the insensitive psychiatrist the day before which had prompted him to arrange to stay with me as much as possible. He wanted to avoid me finding myself alone for another follow-up visit from a doctor and or psychiatrist. He wanted to be as up-to-date with everything as I was. My mother had also brought me some spare clothes and a few beauty products. As I had enough of the hospital gown, I was really keen to take a shower and put on some real clothes. I even took the time to put on a little makeup. Straight away, I felt much more comfortable and even a little sexy. I must admit that I really liked the look of my chest I had as a new mother. My larger breasts really suited me. In any case, the simple matter of getting changed and caring for my appearance did me good. I felt saner. When a nurse turned up in my room, I took the opportunity to ask her if she could remove the little intravenous tube which was still in my hand, even though I was not connected to the drip anymore. It was annoying me and sometimes hurting a little. She replied that it was best to keep it there in case I needed it again. I would have to make do with it. This tube in my hand, along with my hospital wristband, was still proof that I was a patient undergoing treatment, even though I thought I must be looking less and less like one. My mood was improving. I was no longer on such an emotional roller coaster. To be a bit more active and try to make my mind off things a little, I started taking a few walks down the corridor alongside my room, with Elliot nestled up against me in my baby carrier. I needed these moments alone with my baby to prove to myself that I was still capable of doing something with just the two of us, despite my fragile condition. I needed to rediscover a sense of pride and confidence in my ability to be a mother. There was no need to worry, because I was not really alone with him, in fact. The nurse's constant presence in the corridors was reassuring. Some of them were already starting to recognize me and say hello. As the only patient on the floor with a baby, I could not go unnoticed. And yet, a minor incident during the day came to upset me. Elliot was crying a little more than usual, with very piercing wails. Gerhard and I were trying to calm him down while I was changing his diaper, when I felt a sharp rise of irritation, and I was surprised to find myself suddenly directing my hand to Elliot's mouth to make him quiet. But just as my hand reached his lips, I snatched it back immediately and put it straight over my own mouth. I was shocked by my reaction towards Elliot. I burst into tears. I moved away from him, terrified by myself and stunned by the potential I had in me to do him harm. I then imagined hurting my son under the influence of postpartum psychosis. I was distraught. My mother and Gerhard then tried to calm me down, saying gently that I had not tried to hurt him and that I was not in a state of such delusions that I might behave dangerously. I was surely just tired, and Elliot's crying was making me impatient. Despite their attempt to reassure me, I didn't want to look after Elliot for a while except for breastfeeding him. I lost confidence in myself. I was scared of how I would react to him. When he saw how seriously I was taking this incident, and especially as he knew my tendency over the last few days to talk too much, Gerhard encouraged me not to mention anything to the nurses. We did not know how it might be interpreted, and we really didn't want Elliot to be taken away from me under some notions of protection. Gerhard and my mother were already making sure they were always with me when Elliot was there. This reaction of mine had not been typical, and there was no need to worry about it too much. I just needed to get some rest, and that is what I did. Later in the day, the couple who had visited us the day before surprised me with a particular show of kindness. My friend had sent her husband with some meals she had prepared to keep Gerhard and my mother going while they were with me. Some nice home cooking to replace what they had been buying from the hospital Tim Horton. What thoughtfulness from her. I was really grateful. Then Dr. M, who had been ready to send me home a few days earlier, appeared for his daily visit. I did not think terribly highly of him after the incorrect diagnosis he had made of my condition. But each day I would let him examine me and would reply politely to his questions. After all, I didn't have any choice. He was now informed about the diagnosis which Dr. Sain had made, which he really had to take into consideration. But on this occasion, I had something specific in mind. I wanted him to read the text I had written the morning after receiving my first dose of medicine. I wanted him to realize how my condition was affecting me and how seriously it had to be taken. And so I gave him my text and asked him to read it. I sat in the corner of my hospital room and watched Dr. M intently as he carefully read the 2 pages of my text. I was waiting desperately for his reaction and trying to decipher his silence, his eyes which were absorbed in reading, and the hand with which he was gently stroking the back of his head. He did not look at me once. Did he feel embarrassed, realizing the mistake he had made in his judgment of my condition? Who knows? Yet I was convinced he would break the silence by commenting on the seriousness of my mental health. When his eyes finally met mine, I was greatly moved by his words, a solace for my soul which was so distressed after the misery of the last few days. You have talent. You should consider writing a book about this. I was speechless. He had just planted a seed of hope in me. When Gerhard took my mother and Elliot back home late in the afternoon, I decided to go on my computer to make a video montage of my pregnancy photos and the ones we'd taken of Elliot since his birth. I no longer felt the need to reply to my emails. I now knew that it was more sensible not to write anything and not to send anything impulsively. I nevertheless needed to focus my energy somewhere and produce something I was proud of. I was totally absorbed in my activity, taking care to choose the right music for each set of photos I would put in my montage. I was so proud of it that I couldn't resist calling a nurse to show it to her, having forgotten the proper use of the call button. When the nurse arrived in my room, she quickly realized that my need was not urgent, nor did it relate to my physical needs. Since it was a busy time, and she was really busy responding to more urgent requests from the other patients, she said to me gently that she would come back another time. I understood her response. Suddenly, I could think clearly enough to realize that I was completely absorbed in my project, and that my thoughts were running so wildly through my head that I was hardly aware of the reality of other people around me. What I thought really needed sharing as a matter of urgency was not all that pressing for the people looking after me. But I knew that Gerhard would take the time to look at what I had made, and so I started really looking forward to him coming back. When he arrived early evening, we looked at the whole video montage together. Tears of grief flowed down our cheeks as we realized that we were looking at the most wonderful part of our lives, before the shadow of mental illness had weighed down upon us. The photos of Elliot marked the end of an euphoric chapter in our lives. The last of them had been taken when I was descending into the depth of psychosis. What the future held for me was vague, uncertain, and perhaps even a little frightening. But we wanted to believe that it was not the end of those beautiful days. Once we had finished watching it, Gerhard showed me what he had brought with him for a bit of entertainment. He took a DVD out of his bag, which he put in my laptop. He had rented a film for us to watch together in hospital. I remember being really touched by this thoughtfulness from him. I felt at that moment that he really cared about me, despite not being the normal woman he knew. He was taking care of me, looking beyond the symptoms of madness which I was beset by. The beginning of the film can have been very much fun for him. I had comments to make about lots of unimportant details. The scenes passing in front of my eyes were creating a constant flood of ideas in my head, which I felt the need to communicate immediately. Thankfully for him, I became aware of my brain's over-enthusiasm, and to bring the stream of words under control, I kept my hand right over my mouth to remind me to keep quiet and listen. This technique worked well. A few of the scenes made us burst out laughing, which was just what we needed. Once our entertainment was over, we got ready to go to bed. I took my dose of medicine, and before going to sleep properly, Gerhard came to lie close beside me. The warmth of his embrace brought me into a peaceful sleep. Then he lay down on his own bed for the night.